Hi, everyone. I'm Adrian Scott Fine. I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy for the Los Angeles Conservancy. Welcome to today's program. We're really happy to have you all here. And we're very excited to do this program. It's part of our People Plus Places series, where we highlight not just great places and beautiful architecture, but really make the connection about how these places connect to our everyday lives and people that are connected to places. And I can't think of a better example of that than Googie, especially Googie coffee shops, where many of us have been going to these places for years, if not decades, and they're integral parts to our everyday lives. And in many ways, these are kind of examples of everyday modernism that really connects us and allows all of us to be able to experience great modernist designed, not just the fancy residential case study houses, but from Pans to Norms to Denny's, they're everywhere, and we want to keep it that way. So we work really hard to ensure these places are protected and beloved, and they are beloved. So we've been working on efforts over the years of the Conservancy with Norms and Johnny's, just two examples that really illustrate this, and certainly the work of Armet Davis and Newlove in terms of that contribution. And for some background, the Conservancy got started in many ways around Googie and Googie coffee shops in the mid-1980s when we first launched a 50s task force, and then that merged into our Modernism Committee, and now it's really part of our everyday work that we do at the Conservancy in terms of advocating and educating and protecting places from this era and this type of architecture and this design aesthetic. So we're very fortunate today to have three speakers that are going to walk us through and tell us a little about the new book. And I have it right here. If you don't have it yet, it's Googie Modern. So you can see that here on your screen. We are going to put a link in the chat. So anybody that wants to buy the book or wants to order it, we'll make it easy for you about how to get to that from Angel City Press. But here's our three speakers: Michael Murphy, who is the author, and you can see more of his background here and also on our website. I'm not going to read each person's bio, but feel free, Michael, Alan, and Victor, to share more about your background. So thank you, Michael, for being here and for putting this book together. And Alan Hess, who's also a contributor to the book and is, in many ways, I think of him as Mr. Googie. He's worked so hard in terms of advocating for this architecture and what it represents in terms of Southern California and beyond. And then we're very pleased to have Victor Newlove from the firm Armet Davis and Newlove, who has worked to actually create these places and been part of the integral operation in the design. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to quickly switch it over to Michael, Alan, and Victor, who are going to walk us through a little bit about the book, some specific designs, the intent, the background, and stories. And then we will have time at the very end, about 10, maybe 15 minutes at the very end for Q&A. So what I'm going to encourage you to do now and throughout the program is, if you have specific questions, put it into the Q&A function at the bottom of the box here. Any questions that you want us to ask of Alan and Michael and Victor or us at the Conservancy, put it in the Q&A, and then we'll try to get to all those as we go. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And I'm gonna, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Victor, Alan, and Michael to get us going. So, and then I will stop sharing my video. So go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Am I heard well?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and celebrating this book, the genre and mid-century architecture. We're really proud of this product. I'm going to hand this reins over to Alan fairly soon, but I wanted to kind of talk quickly about how this book was made and why I thought it was so important to make, and why I even thought it was even more important to bring in Alan Hess, which I think kind of goes without saying. First things first was I ran into Victor at the Santa Monica Museum while I was giving a museum tour of the exhibition I designed there. And I hadn't seen him in a very long time. And I realized that he was sitting on all these amazing drawings. And I thought it would be a really fun exhibition and maybe a book, but I thought it'd be a really fun exhibition at the Santa Monica History Museum, being that he's a great citizen of Santa Monica. I convinced him to take a private tour with me of the exhibition and the accompanying book that was with the exhibition, to kind of just show him what could be done with content and how it could be exploited as a book and an exhibition. And right there on the spot, he was sold and invited me to his office. When I got to his office and he pointed to where all these drawings were, I quickly realized I was way over my head. And so I decided there on the spot that this was going to be a passion project that needed to be done. I brought in Jens Lucking, who is my ace photographer on all the previous projects. And we began to think of how we're going to shoot these giant drawings. I'm going to go here. A lot of these drawings are between 18 to 4 feet wide. And of course, as you know, they're 50, 60, 70 years old. So shooting these drawings had to be done with an extreme sensitivity. So we did not want to take these drawings off the premises, which was another problem. So what we did was we turned the Armet Davis Newlove meeting room into a giant lighthouse. And we sandwiched these drawings between 2 giant pieces of plastic. And in the course of 3 days that were averaged about 14 hours, we shot hundreds of drawings. What you see here is really just the best in this book. It's 208 pages. These drawings are shot between 7,000 and sometimes 10,000 pixels wide. I'm a very good digger, and many of these drawings I know that Victor himself had not seen before. And once I began to really understand what it was in front of me, I mapped everything out. And I began to realize that I was just going to be paraphrasing the great Alan Hess if I ever made a book out of this. So I brought in Alan Hess to help me, contextualize the amazing aspects of these drawings. What you see a picture of here is Jens shooting the El Rodeo Bowl drawing, which I think is about 4 feet wide. And you can see, obviously, because the 2 panes of plastic are sandwiched, we had to shoot the drawings at an angle. So we had to turn the whole room again into a light box to make sure that it wouldn't have any reflection, and then correct the drawings in post-production. I mapped the majority of these drawings out on a Google Maps that I think we can share in the chat somewhere. And I'm not sure if Jens appreciates his masked costume, but obviously it was a peculiar time during COVID to make a book. First up, we have clocks, and this is an exquisite drawing. What I love about these drawings is that I look at them as not just drawings, but objects. And so obviously you see that tape on the drawing. You see some construction in the back, LAX. And it was these drawings I was able to show Alan Hess to convince him to partner with me on the book and contextualize this in the best way possible. Alan, Victor, please feel free to weigh in whenever possible, but I would say this is when I'm passing the torch to you, Alan.
Okay, well, yeah, we're going to go through a selected series of drawings from the book, and we'll comment on them as well. I want to say thank you to Victor for being here today. He joined Armet Davis in the early 60s and then later became a partner. But at the back of the book, we have an extended interview with him, which is a real window into this marvelous mid-century period in Los Angeles. Such great architects working, new building types being invented, and Googie is one of those. And so when Mike came to me and proposed this project, I was ready to do it. My first book was on Googie way back in 1985, but there's still more to be said and reported about Googie. And especially for this audience with the Conservancy, this is, Googie is part of Los Angeles's international significance for modern architecture. Clock was the first restaurant that Armet Davis did in this style. Of course, the original Googies at Sunset and Crescent Heights by John Lautner was built in 1949. This is 1951. And again, one of the great parts about this book is the drawings themselves, the quality of the graphics. This is still early, but I want you all to kind of compare this with what comes later as Armet and Davis evolved their ideas. This is the second Googies, actually, not the Lautner one, but by Armet and Davis, right across from the Biltmore and Pershing Square. And it's, again, the style of the drawing itself shows the energy, the optimism, the forward-looking character of Los Angeles modernism. And this was also from the mid-1950s.
Hey, Alan.
Yes.
Can I ask you, not everyone may be familiar with Googie in terms of the definition. Can you give us all, just so we're on the same page at the beginning here, a quick definition of Googie?
Oh, sure. The Googie style, as it's come to be known, named after that first John Lautner restaurant, is part of Los Angeles's car culture and its modern architecture. Googie architecture was meant to be seen through the windshield of a car, because at this time in the mid-20th century, the suburbs were expanding, car commercial strips were expanding, and a new type of architecture had to be invited so that these buildings could be seen, could have a presence as you're driving by at 30 or 40 miles per hour. So some of the key elements of Googie would be the roof line, which was very bold, very large scale, but then also underneath it, a glass box so that you could look into the restaurant and see that it was a popular place, and then that would attract you. It was a 3D billboard, basically, for the restaurants. But the style obviously is modern. It's reflecting modern materials, modern engineering, modern structural systems, entirely part of the modern century. So that's roughly, signage, integrated signage is another really important part of Googie. So that's basically it.
One of the most important things I came across with all these drawings was that the branding was done by the architecture firm and done with the drawing. So in many of these cases, you could see branding examples in the door handles, branding examples on the mosaic tiles, a very unique feature.
This is, Huddle was a restaurant chain all across the Southland. The first one was on La Cienega on Restaurant Row. And we have quite a number of illustrations of proposed as well as built Huddle restaurants. It's such a case study in modern architecture. The way that the form follows the function. The function is to have a restaurant that would grab the attention, attract customers. So that's why you have the signs and the great roof lines. Notice in this one, along the left-hand side there, the H's, which were on these panels illuminated from behind, so that at night, the building would stand out just as prominently as during the day. And one reason I wanted to write this book was to get into the operations of the office itself. Who was there? How did they design projects? Who were the clients and what were they looking for? In this case, this is a drawing by one of the architects in the office named Lee Linton. And I might wonder if I might ask Victor now, can you tell us about Lee Linton and also Helen Fong and any other people about how did the office run? Who designed these? How did they come to be?
Well, Lee Linton was the chief designer before I got there back in 1963. And he worked in this particular project. He worked with Paul Cummins, which was, I believe, the owner of the Huddle Restaurants. But he was the chief designer. He would come up with some of the ideas. He was almost like a set designer in some respects. He would come up with these really wild-looking designs, and then it was the idea for us to, or the people that were working in the back of the house, then to convert them into working drawings and to make them work. The people that ran the office, of course, was Eldon Davis and Louis Armet, but Helen Fong was probably the one person who ran the office. She was my first boss, to be honest with you. And I think that she was very oriented towards the interior design of these buildings and colors. I think without her, the restaurants they wouldn't look like the way they look right now. Is that all you want me to say? Is it?
Well, I think there's an interesting point about it was the Huddle on Bundy that made you fall in love with architecture.
Well, it was when I was a child. My family used to take me to the Huddle, which is right on the airport. And I always wanted to be an architect, but I went into this building and I was amazed at the colors, the stained glass, the artwork, the level changes, which you can't do today. And just the overall design, everything that you looked at, every wall, it wasn't plain, it was different. Everything was a statement. And as a child, I don't remember the food at all. I mean, the food could have been just horrible, but I have no idea. But the building was something which was a delight to the eyes. It was like, eye candy. And later, of course, when I ended up going to architecture school and then coming and working for them, back when I was still in architecture, I realized that this is one of the buildings that I like the best and their style.
Yeah. And what you mentioned about how it impressed you, even when you were a child, they impressed me when I was a child also growing up in Pasadena, going to these types of restaurants. And the thing is that this was modernism for the masses. You didn't have to have enough money to build, a beautiful Raphael Soriano or Craig Elwood house up in the Hollywood Hills to be part of modernism. Here, anybody could go in, and these were affordably priced restaurants, and you could enjoy, because of the surroundings, because of the colors, the materials, the spaces, the light, you could know that you were part of an amazing new era.
Well, they had a certain philosophy of design, which they taught me and which they followed. Again, we're looking at buildings which were food factories. And the main thing is that you had to be able to have plans which were efficient, but you had to have designs that would catch your eyes. What you have up on the board right now are concept sketches that never made it. These are for norms. And I'm sure that they went through a number of schemes for Norm Roybach at the time to come up with this design. And then they eventually came up with, I call it like a wing design, very aircraft design, or it could be car design too, for that matter, because everything had wings on them. Well, there you are right there. That's from that's hanging on our walls. That's La Cienega. So we did a whole bunch of these restaurants, and they were quite successful. If you notice the walls undulate, there's, nothing is a straight line if you could try to avoid it. A lot of times the signs, of course, were integrated right up through the building. This one wasn't, but, or sometimes we put things going through like palm trees and that sort of thing. Carolina Pines is one of our, I think, some of the best designs that we ever did in the office personally. And I'm still friends with a friend of mine that happens to be with the family that owned Carolina Pines. And it's just, to me, they were tremendous. The one I liked the best was on Vermont, and that was really an undulating roof. Looked like it was a series of vaults, and it was kind of fun to walk inside. I mean, it was great space.
Yeah, you guys built 3 Carolina Pines. One that we're looking at here is on Sunset and La Brea, which was a catty corner to Tiny Nailers, a very big intersection for Googie and drive-through. The second was the one you mentioned on Vermont, very impressive building, also featured in the book. And the third was in Encino. And we have yet to find an existing photograph of that building.
The one that was on Vermont was interesting because it was meant to look like concrete. But you know, these buildings, we tried to make them look, well, you couldn't do it out of concrete because of the cost. So we did it out of plaster and formed, you know, inexpensive materials. The idea was that the buildings were never meant to last for a great deal of time. I mean, you know, that they had a certain life and that was it. That's the way Eldon felt about it anyway.
I know this is one of Alan's favorite drawings, and this was a built project in Oxnard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this drawing, which is by Lee Linton, you see how he is conveying the energy, the vitality of this modern architecture. And it's one thing why I wanted to be on this project, to get these images out into the public, because Googie architecture was really, it was dismissed, turned down, hated by many conventional critics in its time. They thought it was too showy, it was too two-dimensional, it wasn't real architecture. They didn't know what they were talking about, though. And these drawings show how Armet and Davis and Newlove evolved these drawings, these designs. They, again, going back to the function of them, they worked through, as with the norms that we saw earlier, a couple of earlier schemes as they were working out what would be most practical, buildable, appealing. And then they came up with a fine. That's what all good architecture, that's what Richard Neutra did. He would evolve a design over time. And Googie was just as carefully considered and designed to come up with results. And you see that in all the details.
I don't think in this particular sketch that you see here that we ever built this particular Bob's.
We did not, you guys did not build this as Bob's, but this
we built it as pans.
This became pans.
So a lot of times you do these designs and then you come and revisit it. And of course, this is basically the sketch for Pan's restaurant.
That's right. This is a really unique drawing. Still haven't quite figured out what the experience of drive-through is. And on the little ordering console, it says auto order.
Over on the right-hand side there, right?
Right-hand side.
Yeah.
Now, this particular sketch was done by Don Hawker at the office. And Don was a phenomenal designer and artist. And I loved his cars. I mean, of course, the Manners chain we worked on had a running big boy rather than a regular static big boy. You know, you see the big boy holding up a hamburger. This guy was running with the hamburger. I thought that was unique.
Maybe he was running away.
I don't know. Anyway, I had a chance to get one for free, but he's so expensive to move. It was like 10 feet high or something. I do have a big boy statue at home, but not that big.
Again, a classic prototype design with signature branding.
This one was built, and this one was built on a number of occasions, a curved roof building, we used to call it. And
I've mapped this location in a couple locations. It's quite prevalent.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are still around. They're quite, what can I tell you?
And now, Victor, you worked with Bob Wyan, who is the original Bob's, on some of these, right?
Yes, I did. He, after this particular design was built, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, whatever, he wanted to come up with something which was different. And he wanted something that was almost like a ranch style, more of a residential style of architecture. And so we ended up with a design called the Chula Vista prototype. And that was built hundreds of times. And there, all of the structure was exposed. And the air conditioning was underground and came up on the side of the walls. I remember that I insisted on that. And the landscaping was integrated into the building, just like we always did. But it was a more, what I call a mellow design. And it was quite successful because what happened was that people's tastes changed and they wanted something different. So we, went with the flow of the designs. I don't remember how many hundreds of these things we may have built, but anyway.
I think that's
yes, I did. I worked with Bob Wyan when Mr. Wyan. I was out of college and finished. I mean, I don't even think I had my architectural license at the time. I had my degree, obviously. But he was a wonderful person to work with. And he had these concepts and then eventually sold the Bobs to Marriott Corporation. And so they went with franchising all over the United States.
Well, there was a difference between how these original entrepreneurs, Bob Wyan, Norm Roybark, Paul Cummins, they pretty much knew what they wanted and they had the say when they were working with their architect, versus a corporation which came along later, which tended to water down some of these designs.
Yeah, it was difficult to work with the big corporations a lot of times, I've got to admit. We got Bob Wyan as a client because of Forrest Smith. And Forrest Smith was with the clock. He did the Clocks restaurants, which you showed earlier. And he was, I think, a high school mate with Bob Wyan. And all these people kind of referred one to the other. And Tiny Naylor, as an example, was referred Norm Roybark to Eldon Davis. And they had concepts and ideas that they wanted to do. And they gave us the freedom. And a lot of times, a lot of our clients don't want to give us that kind of freedom. But these people did, which is terrific. It's unique to be able to have the freedom to be able to do whatever you want.
And you see some of that freedom in this unbuilt version of the chicken fry. And you will notice when you zoom in on these drawings, as you can in the book, see tiki elements, tapas cloth and some tiki heads and so forth. There's a fine line, and they overlap. The tiki movement as well as the Googie movement had a lot of parallels.
Let me explain this one. This is, of course, Danny's. And we did, I think, 11 Danny's for, anyway, we did 11 Danny's and eventually got the owner of Danny's got a phone call from an attorney, I think it was for Coffee Dan, saying, well, you can't use the word or the name Danny's. And so he just simply changed the name, the A to an E, and called it Denny's. And so from that point on, we did all of our designs with the name Denny's.
And this was the real prototype that caught on. Armet Davis designed it, and you will see these nationwide still.
Yeah, they're all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's great appropriation as well, which I think is really important for the Conservancy of the buildings is appropriation. And we've seen some really fun examples of appropriation for this prototype design.
Yeah.
They used to steal our designs. People would do it and then they would not be as successful, in my opinion, when you're stealing. We stole ideas too all the time. So I mean, why not?
This is an example of how Googie is not just an individual building, but a whole complex of buildings. This is a motel with a Denny's. You see it in the lower right-hand corner there, Denny's restaurant. But Armet Davis also designed the motel as well. And there's an example of those of you who know Palm Springs, the Ace Hotel is a former Denny's, along with the motel around it. But this concept of how Googie can be flexible, become larger or smaller, part of a larger complex of buildings. There's another example in our book, the Palm Springs Sands, which is a whole resort complex, part of which was built out in Palm Springs. Now, this is a design that you did, right, Victor?
Yeah, it was, we call it kind of the carousel design, and did the interior with Helen Fong. And this particular one was built probably about, I don't know, 60, 70 times. And it was, we had lost the client, Denny's, by that time, because two of the people from our office had gone and to work for Harold Butler, who was the owner. And we actually decided, we came up with this design using one of our prototype plans. And we, in a sense, got the client back again with this design. So we built it a number of times, like I said, about 70 times. This is kind of a fast food. This is starting to get into the fast food industry, or a fast food mode. Taco Sombrero. I don't even remember where this was built, but we were starting to get into fast foods.
One thing, could you go back to the Taco Sombrero, Mike? This to me shows how Googie is part of the long tradition of Los Angeles architecture. Think of the Brown Derby, which goes back to the 1920s, programmatic architecture. A giant hat becomes a restaurant. This is one of the things, that's sort of inventiveness that Los Angeles modern architecture was involved in. Here, Armet and Davis have updated that into a giant sombrero and turned it into a restaurant. I just marvel at this.
This was done by Don Hawker as a designer. I remember that.
Okay, I want to talk about this one a bit because, of course, for the Conservancy, we are interested in preserving these buildings. This was Stanley Burke's on Van Nuys Boulevard from 1958. This is the original rendering for it, and it was built just as you see it here. It went through many evolutions, was added to, became Corky's a couple of decades ago. But this building is now being renovated, restored for a new tenant. And the tenant is, fortunately, has deep pockets and is incredibly enthusiastic about saving this historic modern architecture. So they're investing a lot in bringing it back to this, this view, including the interior. And I'm the historic consultant on this project. The interior was almost completely remodeled in 1981, 40 years ago. And it wiped out all of Helen Fong's original character. But we have been taking off wallboard, taking down an acoustic tile drop ceiling, taking up carpet and tile, and revealing the character of Helen Fong's original conception. And I've got to say, I am even more impressed with Helen Fong's ability as a modern designer. The colors, the composition, the ornamental sconces and features, the way light is used. We're going to be restoring all of that. And when it's done, it's still a year or more before it'll be done. But the real character of modern Googie architecture will come out. I'm really excited about this project.
In Van Nuys, on Van Nuys Boulevard.
Van Nuys Boulevard at Hesby. It looks awful now. It's fenced in, it's got graffiti, but yeah. Stay tuned.
We just lost this building recently. It's incredible rendering.
I like the fireplace, which you see right at the bottom of the sign, kind of a welcoming, you know how Frank Lloyd Wright used hearths, fireplaces at the center of his homes. This did the same thing, but put it right out on the corner.
And then what I have here is just a screen capture of our Google Maps, where I mapped out all these projects before I brought the project to Alan. I think the burgundy ones are buildings that I shot with Jens. So we spent quite a bit of time researching where these buildings were and if they were standing, not standing. And in a lot of cases, there were shadows of themselves or entirely gone, or in some cases, never built. Here we have a juxtaposition of clocks on its old location, kind of contrasting the styles of design and the quality of design.
Okay, this is one of my pet peeves as well. In the mid-century, commercial buildings like the clock and Denny's and others were treated as serious architecture, good design, and the quality of similar commercial architecture has declined greatly in recent decades. I'm sorry to say, but I think one of the reasons of the book is to show what can be done for commercial architecture, buildings that people use in everyday life. This is, of course, Googie's downtown, overlaid on the high rise that was built on that corner across from the Biltmore. At the time, and this goes back, I believe, till the 80s, I wrote a letter to the architect of that new skyscraper and pointed out that they had a historic building, the Googies, which was their part of an older hotel building. And wouldn't it be great to integrate this great piece of modern design into their new design? As you can see, they did not take my my advice on this.
Yeah, one of the great things about this location I learned is that this was the high corner of the block that overlooked the park. So it just must have been amazing to have a cup of coffee and look down at the park. A great contribution to the neighborhood.
And glass all the way around on that. What's great about that building, of course, is that usually Googie buildings were in the middle of a parking lot out on a commercial strip. Here, they conveyed the same sense of dynamism in the design, but at the bottom of a 5-story building. I mean, that shows the sort of skill that Armet Davis Newlove had.
Here we have the Huddle on Bundy, which is the building that looped in Victor to fall in love with architecture. This building was built to overlook Planes Landing on the Santa Monica Airport. I just can't believe that we lost this one. Here we have the Huddle, a slightly bigger design version on Restaurant Row in La Cienega. I went to this location. You could still see little parts of the Huddle in that sushi restaurant that's there on the corner.
When you get the book, you'll be able to really look in detail at these drawings. The drawings, especially the Lee Linton ones, are almost cinematic. You have this broad view of the overall building with cars racing past, but then you can also literally walk into the restaurant, find a counter seat, sit down, see the pie case overhead. You get the sense of the real experience of these buildings through these drawings. This, of course, is Norms on La Cienega. And I've got to, praise the Los Angeles Conservancy. They were the first official preservation organization in the country to say these are important buildings. And I don't know, how 5-6 years ago, they sponsored the nomination as a historic cultural monument in Los Angeles for this Norms when it was threatened.
I think we'd like to start taking some questions. Unless you want to go through a few more images, or
no, I think we're close to done. We'll go Carolina Pines, which was built and looked very much like this. I even saw pictures of this as the copper penny in Ed Ruscha's studies of sunset, which was quite fun.
Yep.
Here, this picture now is a church on Western. Hollies, of course, we lost a few weeks after the filming of Pulp Fiction.
And that's a good point. I mean, these buildings were not accepted at first by conventional critics, but they were embraced by the public and by popular culture. The Coen brothers, Quentin Tarantino, Mad Men, Matthew Weiner, all of these
Incredibles,
popular culture characters appreciated what Googie was all about, what it means to architecture.
The Pateras family were the ones that actually owned Hollies, the ones that now own Pans. That was their building.
And this last one, this is the last slide, is Dimey's in Long Beach on PCH. The building's basically now a giant parking lot for U-Hauls. I guess this is a good time to open up for discussion, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you all. If you want to stop sharing your screen, Michael, so we can see all of your faces, that would be great. And I'm going to kick it off with the question for you all, because it's just dawned on me as we were listening to you, and it's been very fascinating to kind of hear the stories. But we've got all these Googie coffee shops going by, you know, Denny's, Danny, Norm's, Johnny, Bob, Stanley, Corky's. Other than Holly, did we have any Sally's, Betty's, Helen's? What, you know, was that just a product of the times that we were very mill-centric and the naming for these, or do you have more to that story? I'm just curious.
Well, it's a good point. However, Googie was originally named after the wife of the owner of that. Mort Burton was his name, and that was his pet name for his wife. So we can give it some credit there.
Well, it was originally Googie, the Googie doll, the googly eyes, and you can see it in the sign. So you had these Googie dolls, and so it was a female character. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. There's some growth there. Appreciate that.
What's the start?
Yeah. We've got some great questions. So I'm just going to dive in. One of the questions that Alan was asking, or Alan Merson was asking, it's a good question. I think, Alan Hess, you touched on this a little bit in terms of how people looked at this when it was first coming online and not fully understanding or appreciating it, or relegating it as a less than in terms of architecture and the, you know, emerging kind of modernist movement. What did they call this at the time before the term, because the term Googie came later in terms of kind of the nomenclature for this architectural style. So how was this being referred to when they were first being built?
Well, it really, the term Googie was attached to it very early on, 1952. Julius Shulman, the great photographer, was showing an East Coast architecture editor around Los Angeles. They were driving down Sunset and past Lautner's Googies, and the editor, Douglas Haskell, was just floored by it. He said, "What is this?" And Shulman said, "Why, that's Googie architecture." And the editor went home and wrote an article in House and Home magazine. And the thing is that this roadside architecture was being built in almost every American city, not as well as in Los Angeles, but in every American city as they expanded and suburbanized after World War II. So the phenomenon was out there. And this term suddenly, I talked with Charles Fish, who designed the original Golden Arches of McDonald's. And he said that term caught on almost immediately because nobody knew what to make of this extraordinary new architecture. So, but remember that it all came from Los Angeles. This is the root of it.
We used to call it roofitecture.
That's a good one too. I guess Googie's a little catchier in terms of that. Thank you for giving some more background there. My first experience with a Googie building was, I'm from the Midwest, was a Burger Chef, which also I think comes from this area as well, but it was a Midwest franchise. Another good question is, what was the extra cost for this kind of design, rather than just building a basic box for a coffee shop? What was the difference, and why were some of these owners willing to go to that extreme? Was there a lot more to do the kind of more exuberant design versus just a standard kind of box building?
Well, definitely. You're first off, you're minimizing the columns that are holding up the building or the roof, and you have these clear vistas right through the building. Well, you just don't do that with wood construction. Most of them had steel in them, and so you had the expense of going with moment frames and that sort of thing. We also spent a lot of money on our landscaping, much more than other buildings, where we brought the landscaping inboard to the building itself. We certainly spent a lot of money on artwork, and the artists that we dealt with for years. We had a stable of artists that everything in there, like the murals on the walls, the light fixtures, everything was custom designed. So you spent a lot of money on that. I mean, the furniture was a lot of Herman Miller furniture, as an example. I mean, you can't even afford to put that stuff in the restaurants nowadays. But the structure itself, the type of roof that was on it, it did cost us a lot more money. We had really good engineers. Len Eldenson was our structural engineer. We used to call him Mr. Strong. And he would come up with these designs where, that underneath there was a lot of concrete and there was a lot of steel, and the thing was well designed all the way down. And you did pay for that. It's easier to build a box with shear walls and cheaper, but then doesn't look very good.
Great, thank you. Someone brought up, and I think we would be amiss not referencing ships. And maybe Alan, you know more of the story because it's certainly way before my time, but ships was in many ways a catalyst for talking about the preservation of these buildings and the loss of ships in Westwood. Can you share quickly kind of that story and why that was the place that really got people talking about this in the mid-'80s?
Yeah, I think it was 1984 that ships in Westwood went down. There were still ships in Culver City and also on La Cienega near Olympic. Matthew Shipman was the entrepreneur, like Norm and Bob and the others, was part of that crowd. But Ships was near UCLA and in the middle of Westwood, so it was a famous one right on Wilshire. It was torn down in 1984, it closed. I was there on the night it closed and scavenged. In fact, this chandelier that you see over here is from Ships in Westwood. I was able to scavenge that. But yeah, there were a small group of us who realized that something was being lost. If we lost Ships, we were completely outnumbered and there was no real support for saving these buildings then. But as often happens, it's the loss of a really distinguished example of a building type that spurs people. And so, yeah, then the modern committee of the Conservancy and got involved and we realized we were losing this entire type of building. And that brought together a lot of preservationists finally.
By the way, the original sign for Ships and Westwood, Martin Stern was the architect, I believe, is my wife and I went to a house over in that area, and he has it in his backyard. And I remember he invited me over there around dusk, and all of a sudden he flipped this light on, and there was this huge sign, like 12 feet wide in the back. If you could use it to guide airplanes into the place, it was so just huge. So it still exists. And of course, we did the one on La Cienega. I don't know whatever happened to that sign, but that would have been. But he had it as 12 feet wide, and it's all neon. Really great. I can't remember the guy's name. So
the one on La Cienega, the sign with the circle is there, but it's completely bastardized. So
Yeah.
the building's gone, unfortunately.
Well, if I could remember, you could actually, the houses in around Westwood in a really nice neighborhood. I remember that. And, but you'd have to go in the back and look at it.
Well, I would encourage everybody to use their Google satellite, and let's find that.
I better not say who it was. I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad that something survived. And I will say, since ships in the mid 80s, whenever there is a Googie coffee shop, and certainly Norm's was a perfect example that on La Cienega, when it was at risk in around 2015, people came out in droves, and that is our experience. There is a huge audience for these places now. They're beloved. And that is, I think, a credit to Alan, our Modernism Committee, and so many others that really raised the profile and the importance of why these places matter, not just Southern California and Los Angeles, but across the country. People know what Googie is. And that's, I think, a change here. Maybe we got time for one more question, and it really speaks to the value of this book, because we're all able to now see these drawings and renderings that we never saw before and understand more of the process, and they're really gorgeous renderings. So the question that someone was asking, where do these drawings end up now? Is there an archive? Where do they go? It's great to have the book, but where do the original drawings reside or live or going forward?
About 90% of the drawings or more are in the office here, and some of them are at my house, and some with my children, actually. So they have some of the drawings as well. But most of them are here. And we started preserving them. I got the idea of trying to, we used to have them in gigantic rolls, and they would be just laying there. And so I decided that we needed to really try to save them. So I picked the best ones that I thought and had them framed and protected. So, and that's been ongoing. We just recently did that again with about 11 or 12 new renderings, which we put in the offices. But eventually what my goal would be is to have somebody take them and archive them. I don't really want to go out and sell them. I mean, it just isn't something I would really want to do. These original drawings that you see were the concept sketches. And usually what would happen is we would take these sketches and color them, and then give them to the owners as a color rendering. And a lot of those are lost. We then, or a lot of times, we hired professional renderers to then, what we considered professional renders, to do what we considered final product renderings. But the original sketches have the life. These are the ones that are, to me, are great, because a lot of times you'd see studies and people writing on them, do this, don't do this, and all this sort of thing. It was a study.
Yeah, I have a crazy idea to turn Johnny's into the Googie Museum.
Good luck. That's owned by the dollar store.
It is, and maybe we should find a way to get them to use that building again and romanticize the genre.
Well, it would be nice to bring it back to the original design, which was Romeo's Times Square, which I don't think lasted very long, and then it was converted to Johnny's. But Romeo's Times Square, it'd be kind of neat to say it is called Romeo's Times Square. Convert it and actually bring it back to life again. It would be wonderful, because right now it's in a very bad state of disrepair.
It is, and we could house all the drawings and share the drawings and talk about how Cars and Googie are similar, and have a great relationship with the Peterson. Talk about how Googie plays a great role in the movies with the museum there, and obviously Ed Ruscha in the art world with LACMA would be a great opportunity to maintain and celebrate the genre.
Yeah. Well, good luck.
Yeah, right. Good luck.
Well, great. I think you just gave us a good idea. Johnny's is long on our radar to find a resolution and solution to bring it back. It's another beloved coffee shop, and Alan was helpful on that one too, and having it designated as a historic cultural monument. So it's protected, but it still needs to find an end use. So it's on our radar. But that's the end of our time. So I want to thank again Alan, Michael, and Victor for being part of this, for putting this book together, for sharing these renderings that most of us have never seen, and for really answering some of the questions. It's been kind of insightful to understand more kind of the production side about how these buildings came about and some of the thinking behind them, which we don't know that part of the story. So thank you for that. The book is available for people that want to get a copy, Angel City Press. We have the link in the chat. You can go to our website. There's a link there as well. Someone was asking about signed copies. I don't know the answer on that, but I assume that those are available, especially at some of the additional events that are taking place. And this event the program today is being recorded. We'll have it up on our YouTube channel very soon. So please feel free to share that, get a copy of the book, go to your favorite Googie coffee shop or motel or whatever it is. Please support these places and keep them standing. And again, thank you all for being part of this program, and to our speakers, and for all of our members and supporters of the LA Conservancy. We could not do this work without you. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.
Bye.